Hello and welcome to the Sky Blue Times YouTube channel. Today I wanted to talk about the Manchester Derby. City come out winners, a game that they desperately needed a performance and a result to turn around the kind of feeling around the team, within the fan base going forward into the rest of this season. Whether the performance was as encouraging, we'll definitely get into. I think there's some interesting points to take away from that, things to be concerned about, things to watch, things that are going to develop over the course of the season, relationships to develop over the course of the season. But getting that result and some of the individual performances I think were very positive and gave you good signs of looking ahead to the rest of the season. Now if we move over to the kind of like start of how City were looking to build up, the way that Manchester United were set up in this game, usual back three that you come to expect, that kind of 5-2-3 from Manchester United under Ruben Amorim. Fernandes and Ugarte as the double pivot, and a lot of the themes on the progression for Manchester City was in this back three setup. You knew that with the United midfield, Ugarte needed to kind of keep an eye on where Tijjani Reinders is. Fernandes was keeping track of where Foden was, and then he wanted to try and jump from Foden onto Rodri and really give Rodri a lot of pressure. But then the knock on top of that is that once Fernandes jumps onto Rodri, somebody on the back line needs to jump onto Phil Foden. And that kind of coordination between the players that just wasn't there from Manchester United was what City were able to exploit to constantly be able to find 2v1s, 3v2 situations just by exposing this jump. And then also, once they eventually get further progressed into the opposition final third, into their half, you saw more, and we'll touch on this a bit later with the first goal. Then the idea of, can we pin one of these centre backs, i.e., can we have a player like Doku for the opening goal in that space? Can we stop the centre back from jumping to cover Doku? Well, if Tijjani Reinders goes and stands on Luke Shaw, then he pins him as he has to stay with that man. He can't make the jump forward, and suddenly that player in that pocket of space isn't tracked by anybody, even though Fernandes and Ugarte are trying to track other players as well at the same time. But this particular thing that you're seeing here with the progression, Phil Foden, I think, was quite exceptional in this match at being able to find these different pockets of space, off the ball as well. And I think this is an important part when you're looking at how City try and build up with Donnarumma moving forward, the kind of things that we will see. Obviously, this game was not perfect and was not the best performance, was not the final version of a rebuilt team, was not the final version of this team that we'll see this season. But we did see some things in there, and having Josko Vardiol back, who is arguably one of, if not the best centre backs on the ball, certainly for his age, that is anyway, especially for a young left centre back. He's exceptional, and to be able to build more so down that left hand side, lean into his strengths on the ball, I think is going to be one of the routes forward for Manchester City. It's something that American Citizen talked about on one of his threads, how that 45% of the City attack went down the left-hand side. You look at the previous three Premier League matches, the most down the left-hand side was 37%. In one of the games, all the others were close to around 30. You saw some matches where they progressed much more down the right-hand side with Oscar Bob, makes sense. But when you're looking at Josko Vardiol coming back, obviously you're going to look to lean on his strengths playing out from the back, as we saw with City when they had the likes of Laporte and Cancelo playing on that left-hand side. That's an obvious route to try and progress the ball with very technically gifted players. So that's one thing. Kusanov coming in as the right back. When you look at, and I've changed my mind on the situation of right back from what I've seen from the performances. So initially I kind of had the idea that perhaps this won't be a position that will define the Premier League title, and we can get by with the number of short-term options that we do have. But I think for what we've seen quite clearly in the opening few games is that Matheus Nunes is still going to be that guy that consistently makes mistakes. And when you're looking at setting up a team, knowing that at any point, at any phase of the game, any minute in the game, any kind of situation, he can make a mistake that can lead to a shot, that can lead to a goal. You look at that penalty mistake against Brighton, as much as we will pick holes in the different performances and the kind of out of possession setup, that is a huge momentum swinger that Matheus Nunes is made happen by giving away that penalty. And when you look at the save from Donnarumma later in this United match, is another great example of how momentum can swing. You have players that can stop that. Most players can stop that by just not making the kind of bozo mistakes. With Matheus Nunes, you've got that kind of consistency of him delivering those mistakes. So to play him at right back, I think, is a concern. I think there's some matches where you'll probably get away with it. I think there's some use with the fact that he is a right back that can hold the width on that side. But as we saw in this match, having Kusanov come in there for his defensive capabilities, his pace to get back, you'd much rather, and I'd definitely much rather, have Kusanov learn that role, make mistakes, find his way, and trust that he can learn from those mistakes, as I think he has been doing over the first kind of like several games he's played for the club. You'd rather him make those mistakes and learn from them than have Matheus Nunes make those mistakes and not learn from them. We're still looking at the same situation as a right back, as well as knowing that with Kusanov, his future is to play more as a centre back. I think across the season he will play minutes across different positions. With Matheus Nunes, he doesn't have a future as the right back. Just that kind of right back situation in the summer, as much as we may disagree with it, there's obviously the wages factor, the players you need to move on, and the fact that Viana will obviously want a long-term option to come in at right back, not another short-term option. We've got several of those, and as much as for this season that seems like a poor decision, in the long run, if they get the right player in, then it does make sense. So that spot is going to be filled. Matheus Nunes is not going to have that long term. And then with Rico Lewis, you have somebody that can play minutes in midfield, can play in certain games at right back. So he provides you that backup right back option. He offers something different, being able to vert into the midfield, be involved in the build up, be involved in the final third. So you have a very useful option in Rico there. That is homegrown. That's come through the academy. Versus then having your kind of out-and-out starting right back as well, and then you have that position really quite covered for the long term. And when you look at Nico O'Reilly as well, and I've gone on a bit of a tangent here, you've got somebody, along with Aït-Nouri, that can play that kind of width-holding job as a left-back. So if you want to have that and let your wingers move inside, you can do that on the left-hand side. And as we saw in this game, which is the point I'm getting to, they had Kusanov be that kind of really strong, secure defender that kind of shifts into that back three. I think he will, as time progresses, get more and more comfortable in the kind of positions higher up. But primarily he's coming in there to be that safe option, to be cleaning your duels, to add the recovery pace to the back line, and so on. Bernardo Silva doing the job primarily there to be the guy that pulls Dorgu away, holds the width on that side, and is also able to be there for, if you do switch the play like we saw for the lead up to the opening goal. If we do switch the play, you've got somebody that's reliable to receive the ball and not mess it up, to keep hold of possession, to be able to recycle it and return it to Kusanov, to Reinders, etc., as he did many times in this match, despite some of his issues with matching up the physicality of Dorgu, and sometimes getting a bit too be a bit too soft when it comes to trying to apply pressure and win back the ball. But when you're looking at Oscar Bob, who's played a lot of games recently, is still kind of working his way back in, had that concern with injury recently before the international break. I think it's just a safe call in the derby to have played Bernardo, but that role there with Kusanov, a very, very functional role to hold the width, to be safe, to press to a good level, etc., etc. And Dorgu's not an immense threat as a wing back, particularly as a ball crosser, not particularly threatening down on that side. But you had Kusanov that was able to get back with his pace. So I think that kind of makes sense in that regard, because the primary kind of reason for setting up this way is to expose that midfield duo of Manchester United, which is what they were able to pull around so many times to be able to progress the ball. Phil Foden, exceptional as I mentioned, and we'll touch on a few things a bit later. So it is worth mentioning, I think I've got the graphic here, great account, recommend that you check him out. Does lots of stuff on second balls and ball recoveries and so on. As you can see here with Rodri, he leads the team in that game for balls lost, possession lost, balls recovered. Kusanov did have a very good game in this regard, particularly down on this right hand side, being able to recover the ball, obviously. Bernardo Silva as well. So as I just mentioned, with that kind of role that the two of them played, they did their job off the ball. They did their job in possession to be able to hold width and being in the right place. And just on that point with Kusanov, it does remind me of when we had that 23-24 season. You had Akanji kind of filling in to be that kind of spare man because we had Stones deal with the injury, so you couldn't kind of replicate the role that Stones played, that kind of box midfield. You couldn't properly replicate that, but Manuel Akanji did a good job to an extent in fulfilling that role. But as we saw with that player there, and as we saw with Walker when he was playing as right back, that is a player in a team that you have to deliver your defensive capabilities, your defensive qualities, my bad. You have to deliver on those if you're going to play in that position, be reliable, be dependable, be consistent. Because in possession, if you're not a threat, you're somebody that the opposition can leave to not press, to squeeze City in other places on the pitch. And that is what we saw to some extent with Akanji and Walker when they were playing that right back role. If you're not a threatening player, whether it is your runs ahead of the ball, to overlap, to underlap, to cross the ball as a passer, to come inside, etc., etc. If you're not a threat on the ball, you can be then eventually a bit of a robot for the team when they're trying to break down the opposition. So that's just something to kind of bear in mind. There are games where it will suit Kusanov because you know he'll have a lot of work to do. You know his defensive qualities will really shine through. But back to this, Rodri, poor performance in terms of losing the ball many, many times. And as much as City had many examples where they were able to pull apart United to progress the ball, there was a lot of occasions where City were too easily losing the ball in that period trying to progress, particularly with Rodri, which definitely hampered them in that first half to really kind of cut through Manchester United much more consistently, have a better foothold of the game. So that's just something to kind of work out to mention here. You also see Nico O'Reilly, 9 there. I think for the most part had a good game, but he is somebody, despite being really capable in duels, you see that Mbeumo, for example, was able to kind of slip around him at times in the box. So having that size, but then using it and not being so easily kind of pulled around, something that we'll learn. Obviously, somebody new to playing at left back. But then can you be reliable to win your aerial duels and have a real kind of physical nature about you when scrapping for the ball? O'Reilly definitely brings that. So yeah, and I think Harlan mentioned about after the game that they felt really confident going into it, knowing that they had a really tall team that was strong, that could win their duels. So yeah, I think that's the thing with O'Reilly. He does bring a good amount, but still things to work on. You think about the build-up when it comes to a couple of examples. I think Donnarumma gave him a few poor passes, and then some of those passes that he was playing down that left-hand side weren't particularly good, as you can see with these ones over here. Not over here, sorry. Down here when he was trying to play those passes down the line into Doku and some of the players that were pulling out to that left-hand side. But for the most part, I think good performance in a derby from a player that's come through your academy that I think is going to continue to play a lot of minutes now that Aït-Nouri is out injured for a number of games. When I was looking at some of the stats, I think I saw Rodri completed 46 out of 53 passes against Manchester United, completion percentage of 86.8%. The last Premier League start, Rodri played 70 plus minutes and had a completion percentage lower than that, was against Liverpool, the 10th of March, 86.5%. So that would have been the 23-24 season, Jurgen Klopp. I think that was an away game as well. So you can remember that game. They really did get on top of City in that game, the 23-24 season. So been a long time. Obviously, he's had his injury, so you kind of missed out that year. But it's no surprise the game that come last is a game against Liverpool at Anfield with the way that a Klopp team would press City. Last Premier League start where Rodri played 70 plus minutes, completed fewer passes, was against Arsenal, 15th of February 2023, so during the treble season, and he only completed 32 passes in that game. And if you remember correctly, that was a game where City didn't have a majority of possession, let Arsenal have the ball, sat off them, and used the kind of counter-attack in the transition or moments that they had with De Bruyne, with Erling Haaland, with Jack Grealish. And it was that one, along with a few other performances, that kind of felt like they pushed Arsenal in this more conservative style that we've seen from them of late. And perhaps that's a bit of a sign of what we could see a bit more from City in certain games going forward, particularly on the game of the weekend against Arsenal. We may well see that Arsenal do dominate the ball and City lean into the kind of more transitional moments that they could have with the players that they have right now, with Erling Haaland and so on. But I just thought that's something worth mentioning. As well as that, the build-up percentage, they had 81.8% build-up completion. That's the lowest total since the 23-24 season. Lowest Premier League total, that is. I think the PSG game in the Champions League last season away was slightly better by like 1% or 2. But that is the type of game that you should remember as a City fan being quite poor. The team and building up, getting pressed very well by PSG and really struggling to progress that ball. So that's another thing to think about when we go into the rest of the season. I don't expect Rodri to be this poor on the ball, and that played a big role in the first half. City struggling to progress the ball as much as they could do. Despite the success they did have, they could have sliced through them a lot better. If we move over to this one here, this is just a look at the possession set up in possession. So you can see this is the lead up to the first goal. As I mentioned, when you're having that overload in midfield, that was the kind of priority of Man City in this game. Definitely in that first half and the start towards the second half. Fernandes tracking Foden. Ugarte really should be tracking Reinders, but he's get drawn into to jumping onto Rodri. Bernardo Silva holding the width out there, pulling Dorgu over to him on that side. Kusanov a bit further back, and I'm keeping an eye on him, but again, not really somebody that's looking to do anything. But they're just there to hold their positions and leave the space to be occupied. Jeremy Doku in this match, we did see in parts we saw where Jeremy Doku was holding the width on the left hand side, and in parts where we saw Nicola O'Reilly doing that. In the lead up to the first goal, which we'll touch on just after this, is Doku that moves inside, and O'Reilly was tucking inside at times, so he wasn't all the way out there trying to hold the width. When City were on the opposite side, he would tuck in, keep track with Mbeumo, which then meant that Vardiol had an easier time on the ball. He'd also look to go near Mazraoui, then come inside. So then he's trying to pull the wing back over to one side and trying to play around with them there. There was an occasion where O'Reilly managed to slip inside into the middle. I think he gets it off Reinders, gets a shot off. Could have played it through for Erling Haaland. So him as well as Doku was looking to move inside. And as I mentioned earlier, that idea of pinning the opposition. So you have that overload in the midfield. You know that the centre-backs need to jump. You've got Jeremy Doku that's found himself a nice bit of space behind Ugarte, behind Ahmad. And then what Reinders does is come over and pins Shaw standing right next to him. That means he can't jump to Jeremy Doku. So then Rodri can play it between the lines. Doku quickly turns. Reinders, by the time he's played that pass, Reinders is then already making his run. And then Doku's able to beat Shaw, get into the box, and eventually Sekitan Vasson gets that pass over to Phil Foden. So that's that there. This just go through the first goal. So as I mentioned, Jeremy Doku in that space. Reinders pinning Shaw. Bernardo out here. Kusanov over here. O'Reilly, as I mentioned, tucking inside. Mbeumo has to kind of keep track of him. Fernandes is keeping his eye on Phil Foden. And then, Rodri plays that pass through. Doku able to turn. You see Phil Foden coming to make that run there. Fernandes goes with him. Bernardo holding the width. Doku's then able to make his move. You can see here now that Phil Foden, as soon as Fernandes has looked away, has got a bit distracted by what's going on with Doku. Ugarte trying to get there, but he's able to shrug him off. Now Phil's already trying to find himself some space to get into the box. Jeremy Doku gets himself into the box here, beats Shaw quite easily. See Phil Foden ghost in there, right at the back. Fernandes has completely lost him. Tries to play that first cross that gets blocked. Ball bounces nicely for him, and then he's able to get the cross chipped over the top. You see here with Phil Foden, Fernandes has not kept up with him, and he's also not made the kind of like first rush with Doku, so he hasn't, as soon as Doku's gone into the box, Foden hasn't gone immediately to try and hit into the 6-yard box. He's waited there, giving himself the space to be able to attack, nicely been able to lose Fernandes, and then he's able to arrive onto that cross to make the header. So all round from Phil, I think really, really good job for that. as well as Jeremy Doku to beat Shaw and the whole team to pin him. The whole goal is exactly what teams have been trying to do against Manchester United, particularly in the opening games of this Premier League season. Fulham, I think they've spoken about with their players and the manager as well about how they can to find that space in front of the centre backs, and with City they did it really quite easily in that first half, particularly for that goal. And then you see Jeremy Doku makes a crossover. Phil Foden does really, really well with that header to just cushion it into the far corner. Goalie's not able to get near it. We then move over to the second goal. In this, O'Reilly nutmegs the player, passes to Phil. Phil's able to just get it round to Jeremy Doku, who this time has pinned the centre-back himself, has the strength to be able to hold him off. So he gets the ball, receives it, able to turn and drive into the box. You also notice with Erling Haaland, I'll point out Bernardo as well over on this side, so he's still holding that width that Dorgu has to keep an eye on, and then Reijnders is then looking to make his run into the box. But if you look on with Erling Haaland, what he does a really good job with is his run. So Shaw's there, the guy then having to track him. He's making that run from the inside to out into the box. So he's coming behind De Ligt, who just won't be able to see him coming in time. Jeremy Doku does very, very well here to receive the ball, hold off Euro, turn, and then he lays that pass into Erling Haaland in the box. And then Haaland, as he spoke about after the match, he didn't have to do anything. I think he said it's called, they call it like a De Bruyne pass, where you don't have to do anything other than your shot. So he just has to orientate his body nicely to be able to make the chip over to the far corner. That then makes it 2-0 from Erling Haaland after that goal. And just that kind of point with Jeremy Doku, I think that's something we might see more and more as we go into some of the games. If you're going to have somebody like O'Reilly, I think it would also benefit Aït-Nouri to play a similar role out wide and not have him drop deep to be in the midfield or be the kind of left centre back. I think it would suit him better to play the role that O'Reilly played actually. But that kind of role from Jeremy Doku of being able to move inside, you think about him as a dribbler when he was struggling, or the team itself was struggling to get more from him, playing him really out wide. It's easy for teams to double up on Jeremy Doku out wide, and then what they look to do is try and make that back pass very, very narrow to the centre-back, to Vardiol, for example. Make it very, very narrow, and then that means you can jump on, press, and try and nip that ball, and then you're able to quickly get yourself a transition. So if you're gonna have him the freedom to kind of move inside as he does in this, then much more difficult to be able to get doubled up on, harder for a midfield to kind of make sure they track, and then also for a centre-back to have Jeremy Doku dribbling straight on at you, much harder to be able to read. You haven't got the idea of I'm trying to force him one way or the other because he's coming directly into the box. So either way he goes, he's getting an entry into the penalty box, versus when you're talking about a fullback that can kind of look to shift Doku wide to the touchline and kind of minimise and then hope that the centre-back on the inside is able to close that cross or stop the cutback from coming into one of the City teammates. So having him more inside I think is much more useful, much more dangerous. Just get him into better positions inside the box, or he's making better, more dangerous passes into the box. And then also in the build-up, you've got somebody there, and we saw this throughout the game, who's really strong to hold up the ball. A different option from Erling Haaland, so you're not just got one option. The opposition knows they're always going to hit it into him. I think with Donnarumma as well, when you're trying to look at the kind of different ideas for him when he's trying to play out from the back, give him options. Doku on that side, another kind of proper realistic option for him to hit the ball into, who can hold up, deal with the ball coming in with a back to the opposition defender, strong enough to hold him off, to turn him or to lay a pass off, and then City are able to just move out and build up from there. So I think that kind of role from Jeremy Doku, we're probably going to see a bit more across this season. I know Guardiola mentioned last season about him not being comfortable moving inside, but particularly for that first goal, the way he kind of, and you should be able to find the video online, there's one of him where he moves into the space, he's looking, spots Ugarte. As soon as Ugarte moves up, he goes into the space behind him. Just really smart from Jeremy Doku to know where the space is, to be able to scan and so on, to be in the right position in the pockets, and then also to not get too drawn up. I think one of the issues with Jack Grealish that people clamoured for being as a number 8. One of his issues when he's playing in these more kind of interior zones is he wants the ball to feet, he wants to come towards the ball, so then the space that's there doesn't get occupied. If you go and watch the Juventus game, although people probably won't want to, if you watch the Juventus game last season, Champions League away, that was one of the issues that you saw with Jack Grealish when he was playing inside, was there would be the space there, but then he's encroaching and coming a bit more towards the ball, rather than being patient and staying in the space and staying there like Jeremy Doku does for that first goal. If Doku's moving a bit more closer to Ugarte, to Rodri, to try and get the ball, then he's not going to have enough time. Once he gets it to turn and be able to hold off Ugarte would have been too close to him. So it's all about your positioning, being in the right space, and then being patient for it. And Jeremy Doku does a really, really good job on that. I'll just move over to this one here. I wanted to mention Phil, who I thought was, if Haaland didn't have that kind of like energy he brought to the entire game, as well as the goals, but the way he kind of led the team, I think Phil also showed that he's one of, if not the best players on the pitch in this match, and gave you a glimpse of that Phil Foden we saw from the Player of the Season campaign 23-24. 11 ball recoveries against Manchester United is his best total in a single match. I think when I was looking, the best from the 24-25 season was 5 in a single match. And particularly last season, it felt like he was almost a passenger out of possession. You could also see people suggesting that Phil out of possession wasn't good enough for Manchester to be able to play in the midfield. But he showed in this match he actually is. And a lot of the last season was due to his troubles with injury, due to stuff off the pitch as well. When I was looking at his entire City career as well, the best single match total he had for ball recoveries. So he's had 9 in 19-20 season against Everton at home. 23-24 season, he had 2 games where he got 9 ball recoveries in a single match. That was Newcastle at home. Think about the Julian Alvarez winner. Really good goal, that one. And then Bournemouth away, 23-24, which I think was when we won. Might have won 1-0 there, and Phil Foden scored the winner. But he had 9 ball recoveries in that one as well. But then this match against United, he had 11 ball recoveries. You move him into midfield, then you've got a player that, as we saw with Bernardo being out wide rather than Phil, you've got somebody that's just a lot more proactive, winning back the ball, counter-pressing, puts himself about there, particularly in games like this, as well as being somebody that's just always looking to find pockets of space in the midfield and give the team an option to progress. Thought he was exceptional in this match. Long may it continue. More performances from Phil Foden like this, and City will definitely be looking to be in a title race if he's able to sustain these kind of performances. I think this is the first time as well he's completed a full 90 since February 22nd, which was against Liverpool, that away game of last season. So it's been a long time since we've had Phil for a full 90 minutes. Back to what looks like his best, and as you can see, this is a player that's absolutely one of the best players in the Premier League when he's on form. So if we can have him back to that consistently, then that's huge for the team. As I think Guardiola mentioned as well, he is very much the heart of the City team. Haaland was talking about him being kind of Manchester City, being the team. So yeah, key player to have back, and at his best. We just move over to this one here. This is for the third goal. I would just say as well, what we did see is more of City, and I'll touch on this a bit later, more of City sat deeper in a block. So you've got Phil Foden inside here, Reinders here, Rodri here, deeper in that kind of 4-1-4-1. Idea is to kind of better control that central space, although you're making it easy for the opposition to progress out wide. You need your 8s to jump up and apply pressure either side of Erling Haaland. So that's something I think when you're looking at the opening couple games, particularly that kind of deep block, which we also saw against Chelsea, Ipswich, West Ham in the opening few games last season, might be something that changes. I remember when we had the Brentford game at home last season, they changed to a 4-2-4 and then into a 4-4-2 block, and then they kept that 4-4-2 for a lot of the season, apart from when you go towards the end of last season when they were doing a bit more of a kind of 4-3 at times. But for the most part, they shifted back to that kind of 4-4-2 block. So we might well see this kind of 4-1-4-1 for the opening few games, whilst Rodri's kind of recovering physically. And then you might see them shift it like they did last season. but you need both the number 8. So if that's Phil and that's Reinders, you need him to jump up and be very proactive, applying pressure either side. But yeah, so back to third goal. You see Bernardo jump on the player here. Erling Haaland ready to jump onto Maguire there. They're very, very high, almost like too high than we were playing in the team was last season, when they were trying to squeeze the territory so high up the pitch that we were giving so much space in behind. And United have kind of done this even more so that you would have ever seen from a City team. So yeah, Haaland then jumps on here. Maguire then tries to make that pass. You can see Bernardo was already looping around to go over and nip that pass. So he's able to get it, plays the ball in behind, obviously not offside, it's inside around half. And then Erling Haaland is away. Classic kind of left foot finish from him, curled into the far corner. When I was looking at some of the stats, this is his 50th goal in his 50th home Premier League game for Manchester City. In the competition's history, only Alan Shearer has required fewer home appearances to hit 50 goals, and he did it in 47. So when you're talking about somebody that holds the all-time goals record for the Premier League, being the only person who's managed to do a better scoring record than you, and that's only by 3 games as well, tells you a lot about just how impressive the numbers and the player is in Erling Haaland. He's also been directly involved in more Premier League goals versus Manchester United than any other Manchester City player, and he's equalled Sergio Aguero's for most goals, which was 8 each. So yeah, really impressive from Erling Haaland. I think one of the few other things I was looking at as well, and looking at the kind of like differences between the numbers of him previous seasons versus this season under City. Obviously, stress, very small sample size, talking about 4 Premier League games. But just kind of a few things I saw. So he has an average of 12.2 yards for his shooting distance across his career at Manchester City over 3 seasons. Just for this current season, he's on 10.1 yards, so he's getting more and more shots closer, on average, closer to the opposition goal. If you look at other PER 92 metrics on his average at the club, his shots on target has gone from 1.78 to 2.11 this season. Non-penalty XG per 90 has gone from 0.76 to 1.5. And obviously, that's not going to be sustainable. You'd think, well, I'd hope not, but you think it's not sustainable. I don't think there's a Premier League player that's averaged more than 1.0 on non-penalty XG per 90 across a whole Premier League season. So for him to be on 1.5 is quite ridiculous. To bear in mind as well that he's not had a penalty yet. So that's another thing that would boost the total XG as well. In addition to this, which is just the non-penalty XG. So yeah, really quite crazy, but tells you a lot about the quality of chances he's getting. By far and away, he's had the most shots in the Premier League, most shots on target, most XG created for him. So even though we're looking at a City side where they have 2 wins out of 4, they've had issues in 2 of those games against Spurs, against Brighton. When we were looking at last season about Erling Haaland not getting enough chances, and we were worried that he wasn't getting enough opportunities created for him by the team, they weren't playing the passes into Erling Haaland. That's one thing we can definitely take away from these opening 4 games, is that they are doing that. And then another thing as well, I remember pointing out this in one of my newsletters previewing the season, talking about the new coaching staff coming in, was to improve on the high turnovers. We haven't seen a goal scored from a high turnover by the team this season, but last season City and Bournemouth led the Premier League for high turnovers. They had 357 each, yet 13.2% of those turnovers resulted in a shot for City, compared to Bournemouth, where 20.2% of those resulted in a shot. Across the opening 4 Premier League games, Manchester City does not lead for the most high turnovers, but they do. I think they're in the top 5. They have 25 in total, and 28% of those have resulted in a shot on goal. So that is an improvement. Again, very small sample size, but you could definitely see in these opening couple games that they do want attacking players higher up the pitch. They do want to play the balls more quickly into Erling Haaland, into the attacking players. When they do recover the ball high up the pitch, they are looking to make the quick, efficient pass and then get a shot off, more so than they were last season, a little bit more hesitant. And I guess as well, some of the players that you've got there when you're looking at Gundogan and Bernardo being like in the middle, high up the pitch, you've got players that are a little bit more hesitant. So yeah, I think that's promising signs again when you're looking at the opening 4 games to try and find some of the positives. These are things that we would have all thought about. I would have thought, as City fans, would have thought about wanting to improve next season, to change with the new coaching staff. And there are definitely some signs that we are seeing that you can be positive about. So yeah, we move on to this here. I did want to mention, so it's very important for a team to be able to create consistently chances when the game state is 0-0, when you're winning 1-0, when you're down 1-0, etc. Those kind of situations, it's important that the team is able to be creative. And obviously there's going to be differences. There's going to be teams that once they win 1-0, they're not as creative. They look to kind of control a bit more. You think about the City teams, 22, 23, 2021. Those teams were a little bit more towards the kind of control aspect. Teams like 21, 22, a bit more creative, a bit more attacking when they do go up by a goal. But if you're down by 3 goals, you think about if we were going back to the game against Arsenal last season where we were losing 5-1. If we finished level on XG, and then I showed you a chart that we created nearly all of our XG after Arsenal were leading by 5 goals, it's not that impressive to have had that much XG, because obviously the team at Arsenal was sat off, and it changed the dynamic of the game. When you look at the game against United at the weekend, you look at all their significant chances they were able to create, they all come after Manchester City are already 3-0 up. Yet when you're looking at the XG, it's a lot closer than you would have expected when you were watching a match. I think when I was looking, so I'll see if I can find, when I was looking at some of it, so I think they had 1.51 XG over the course of the match. But there's significant chances of Mbeumo inside the 6-yard box. I think he hits it with his wrong foot and it goes wide. That was 0.58 XG. Casemiro from one of the corners, 0.47 XG. So that is near enough. All of their XG is coming from those 2 chances after Manchester City were already leading by 3-0. Sat off the game a bit more. As we saw in that second half, I think they had close to 30% possession. The final 5 minutes of the game, City went to 5-4-1. Oscar Bob come on for Haaland. Ake came on for Bernardo. 87th minute, and you should, if you watch the game, you'll be able to see they showed when Ake was spelling out 5-4-1 between Pep Guardiola and then talking to the rest of the team. So for that final 5 minutes, they really did not bother to try and win the ball high, get the ball in a corner flag like they would have done in previous seasons. They were more than happy to sit deep for those final 5 to 10 minutes, see it out, including injury time. But for the second half as a whole, I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Given them, obviously, the percentage of possession is going to be a bit higher without the kind of way they sat deep really towards the end after being 3-0 up. And so there's probably a little bit of stuff lost there. But they still had less possession. They were still less capable of winning back the ball. They did look to make transitions as when the opportunities did come, rather than kind of settle down, control possession, recycle it, and so on. So that's definitely one part. I think another one is that the out possession shape, the way they would kind of look to press, where you'd have Erling Haaland up top, the 2 wingers either side, the 2 8s pushed up in the line, Rodri behind. So you had that 4-1-4-1. That definitely is a structure that does have some issues. You've got Rodri there that is not consistently dropping into the back line to give him a +1 and allow a fullback to press up. He's not jumping in with the midfield line as one of the number 8s jumps up. So the game is just going on around him. Your best player out of possession is not directly involved in that press, winning back the ball. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on, because it just become easy for teams, and we saw this not consistently throughout all the matches as some people will try and suggest, but we definitely saw moments in all of the opening 4 Premier League games that teams were having some success playing around Manchester City quite easily into the wide areas, and then City were struggling to kind of lock those positions off. And that kind of structure that they do have makes it a bit more easier for teams to be able to access those wide areas just naturally with the shape that they do have. And then trying to understand the situation with what they were doing with Rodri. Perhaps I've seen people talking about whether they are looking to kind of preserve Rodri, reduce the kind of physical load. I can't can't think that he doesn't understand the role, because it really is quite a simple one, and we saw Nico be able to do that. But even with Nico, we saw the kind of ways it can get exposed against Spurs and against Wolves, as well as he was doing. And then if you're trying to, as we've seen of late, how many teams are kind of now trying to make the opposition midfielders jump, and because they know they're going to jump, they then know the space they want to attack. So then on the kind of flip side of that, if you're the team that knows that's going to happen, you're then more cautious to commit your midfielders and expose the space in the middle. So maybe you want to try and play your DM, your number 6, in more of a kind of zonal approach. But yeah, just from those opening few games, it doesn't look like it's working entirely well. If you go back to the opening games of last season, Chelsea, Ipswich, West Ham, they also played that 4-1-4-1, which at the time I was thinking it's just something to make sure Kovacic stays a lot more central before he's then able to go out to track runners or support out in the wide areas. But it got scrapped really quite quickly, and they moved on from that. So I do wonder if we'll eventually see that change. If they're going to run this against Arsenal, then it's definitely something I can see them having success against us, being able to play quite easily out wide around the Manchester City block and then be able to create chances. We may see against Napoli in that game that we already have that change starting to happen with the shape out of possession. But I think that's just something to keep an eye on. That's what gave United some success, some control of the ball. And City will definitely have to make tweaks there. As much as we can talk about their attacking quality and how good they were in possession, and how much better they will be once the players don't make as many mistakes, that kind of shape is something that they'll have to look at and could be a concern going forward. Just move over. Donnarumma, lots of praise all across the timeline by Haaland as well. The kind of presence of him as a proper leader in the dressing room. I think his agent spoke about him being asked to wake up the team. You've seen immediately this is somebody that is always communicating with his own defence, Kusanov, Diaz, etc. I seen him spoke earlier today ahead of the Champions League game about how important it is for him that the team welcomed him right away, and then when he's making these saves, they're celebrating them as a unit as much as they would when they scored a goal. You can just already see this guy is very experienced. He is a leader. He's that kind of character and experience they needed in a team that is rebuilding, that's changing through players, and is losing their experienced players. So I think it's really good that they brought him in from that angle. I think you saw the save he made against Bremo that doesn't allow the momentum to swing. Very important for a goalkeeper to have a decisive influence in a game is to be able to pull off saves like that. And then also I think we saw crosses. Somebody, like many people, myself included, you've seen definitely areas where he struggled when it comes to claiming crosses. In this match, you saw him pushing guys out of the way, clearing his path to be able to punch the ball. So that was really good to see and promising moving forward, as that's one of the areas to be kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say concerned, but to definitely keep an eye on. As you can see here, like obviously a lot of passes that are just going to be out to Vardiol, out to O'Reilly, simple short passes, goal kicks as well. You saw that they had Vardiol, Diaz between the two of them coming into the box, Vardiol inside the 6-yard box. So as I mentioned at the very start of the show, I think they'll lean a lot on Vardiol. And in that, some of them looked quite rehearsed, the idea of like playing immediately out to one of them, and then the centre back could then launch the pass far down. They look to play that kind of long pass, as you can see here, over on this corner, targeting that side. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what they do. But there was a few kind of ones that looked rehearsed, where it was as if they were trying to play the quick short pass and then hit the ball long up, get it out for a throw in, high up the pitch, and then that'd be a better situation for them to be able to recover the ball from the opposition and be in a better shape, rather than try and play through the press. But yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. Obviously only here for a couple of games. I'm sure there's going to be things that they're going to work on, look to improve. There was plenty of examples of him not playing those passes between the lines when the likes of Phil Foden drops, and the option is there. How much he improves on that and spotting that and taking those risks, I don't know. But yeah, I think all in all, when you talk about the leadership, the influence he's had on the kind of confidence of the back line, making those saves and how he did in corners in particular. Really encouraging, especially ahead of this season. So yeah, I think very good debut. Obviously, areas to kind of keep an eye on, areas where you think the team will come up with kind of better solutions, and it's early on for that. But for the most part, really quite happy with the performance of Donnarumma. And then I just wanted to kind of leave on this point here. We are seeing a team that is becoming more different. That is changing up what they are doing. So this is the percentage of total touches by the middle third across many of the seasons under Guardiola, apart from the 16-17 season. As you can see, middle third really quite consistent. Last 3 seasons that drops, and then now we're seeing that pick up this season. Final third touches increase over the last couple of seasons. That kind of approach of wanting to control the territory high up the pitch is something we've seen of late from Guardiola, and then especially last season to be exposed with the space behind, and then teams were just getting better at being able to access that space. This season, again, very small sample size, only 4 games, but you see the big shift there with final third touches dropping way down, just over 20%. I think there's around 22%-ish. And then the defensive third touches have shot up to near enough like 33-34%. Obviously, there's some part of that will be the opposition just having more of the ball and so on, but that kind of idea of City operating a little bit deeper in the way they're progressing, not trying to pin teams back in their 6-yard box, in their penalty box, sorry, and not trying to pin teams right back in the penalty box and squeeze them into the final third, squeeze all the team up as they have been over the last couple of seasons. They are making a change, and this is definitely not the kind of finished version of that, the finished version of what this team will become or what it will become in the next few weeks. But we're definitely seeing early signs of some sort of change in that regard. So yeah, pretty much it. Moves me towards the end. I think really good performance overall from a number of players, in particular Haaland, Jeremy Doku, and Phil Foden. I think Hushmanov really impressive as well. Weakest players would be Rodri and Reinders, and a lot of improvement you expect to come from those 2 guys. You'd expect somebody like Bernardo to eventually be moved out the team for somebody like Oscar Bob when it comes to kind of back end of the season. Great to have Josko Vardio back. Really good impact from Donnarumma. Lovely to see how well O'Reilly has done coming in for the place of Aït-Nouri, who's injured. And ahead of the Napoli game, very tough one. I think team looks in a lot better place in terms of the mood, the energy, especially with the fans as well. And yeah, looking forward to seeing whether the concerns I mentioned in this video that people have had, we do see those changes in those next couple of games, particularly ahead of the Arsenal game, what changes they're going to make so that they are a bit more secure at position and not so easily played around when we do come to that game at the Emirates. But a win against Napoli, a point away at Arsenal, completely swings the way that people have perceived the team going into the season. Even a win at Arsenal would be really quite sensational to be able to pull off going into the rest of the Premier League season, and kind of swings that momentum. But we shall see. If there's anything that you think I've missed out on, anything you have a question on, please let me know down below, and I'll jump in the replies and speak to you on that. Make sure you like the video to help support the channel, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video.